Good afternoon, dear colleagues, dear guests, dear participants of our round table. Let me, on behalf of the Russian Geographical Society, to greet you at our unique museum and exhibition center of the Russian Geographical Society, the Konstantinovskaya Pitirim. The Russian Geographical Society is the oldest public organization in Russia. In August this year we celebrated 175th anniversary, and since its foundation the Russian Geographical Society paid a lot of attention to historical and cultural memory, to the cultural heritage of our country. And it's very symbolic that you, dear guests, have gathered here at our platform, being a part of a big international scientific Congress, the Yalta Peace, Historical Experience and Perspectives. These are not just loud words towards the historical heritage. One of the examples is the restoration of the unique Konstantinovskaya battery, which was provided under the surveillance of the Russian Geographical Society. As the president said, this was restored from the ruins. The president of the society, Ageev, said that. And we would like to invite you to visit our museum. It's an incredibly interesting excursion, and our guides will tell you how Suvorov founded this battery, and it was constructed by Admiral Lazarev, and it's a very interesting excursion. As for the theme for the Great Patriotic War, this battery took part in two heroic sieges of the city in Crimea War and in World War II, and the soldiers fought to the last in 1942. There was a stronghold here. It was one of the last points of the city which was not yet occupied, and from here the last ships with wounded soldiers left, and with the citizens of the city left it in 1942. In 1944 there was a water landing, and it's very symbolic that at that moment nobody knew that the beginning of the operation was on the 8th of May 1944, and it was won on the 9th of May. And in November, when the Treaty of Surrender was not yet signed, but in November they opened a monument in the internal yard. You will see it, a monument to the victims of this siege. I wish you fruitful work, fruitful discussion, and I wish you to stay healthy. Unfortunately, I have to leave you because we have a lot of tasks, and I will rush to the southern part. And on behalf of the Russian Geographical Society, I will leave Svetlana Rubtsova. She's the oldest member of our society. You know her pretty well, and we hope to see you at the excursion. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I would like to perform an important task. We have brought with us a bookshelf with the volumes of the project History Told by the People. There is a lot of very interesting information, and there are a lot of stories told by the citizens of Sevastopol in all the volumes. So the last one was dedicated to the 75th anniversary of the foundation of industrial community, and you can open any page and find a lot of interesting things there. A book by Yuri Yakovets, who is our patriarch, and a book by Veronika Ageevskaya. I would like to say a few words about her. When the Germans came up to Moscow in October, on the 20th of October 1941, she went to the military enlistment office, and she wanted to go to the front, but she was just 17 years old, and they gave you the documents, and they said, if the Germans come here, please eat it. And she spent all this time under the sofa, but when the Germans went away, she came back to the military enlistment office, and they sent her to Nizhny Novgorod to an intelligence school with a note, and the note read, if you see this fool, please send her back to her parents. But she nevertheless became an intelligence officer, and she worked in intelligence, and she fought at the front, and at the beginning of Korean War she spoke to Stalin, and she later on was a professor in Moscow University. So this is the library we're leaving to you, and together with these two volumes, The History of the Great War, this is the summary of a 12-volume publication, which was surveyed by Sergei Shoigu. So we started this project with the full version and the abridged versions of the books on the First World War I, World War II, the Cold War, and so we are leaving this library with you. Thank you very much. We started to form our library in the beginning of 2015, and we appreciate all the books. I try to read all the books in this library. Thank you very much. It's a wonderful gift to our library. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. Dear colleagues, let us go on with our work. I would like to remind you once more about our strict time limit. And so, in order for you not to think that it is really strict, I will tell you how 10 years ago I was at a congress in St. Petersburg. There were a lot of foreign participants, and suddenly the moderator, the rector of the St. Petersburg University, said that our time limit will be 1 minute. The audience was shocked, and he set on an alarm, and when 1 minute was over, there came out an increasing signal, and it was impossible to speak. And after 5 or 6 speakers, everyone managed to squeeze their speeches into 1 minute, and it was incredibly interactive, and 5 minutes is very generous. I would like to highlight that we understand that each of you is a carrier of unique knowledge, but we are just getting to know each other. So at the moment we will moderate together with Svetlana Rubtsova. As we have just found out, she is the oldest member of the Geographical Society, a young oldest member, and at the moment we are having a number of speakers who have not managed to get here for various reasons. Their speeches will be published on the website, and first of all Mini Zaslavsky, and I would like to invite Gennady Kosov, the head of the Department of International Affairs and the Geography of international countries. Dear colleagues, the main part of my speech will be published in the magazine, and I will just mention some most important things. When I started to plunge into the educational subject of our university, I was faced with the problem of East and West, the problem of the West and something that is not the West. Here I had a question, when and where did this split into the West and non-West, East and non-East happen? And here we can remember the lines by Kipling, oh, East is East and West is West, and never the twain shall meet. So Kipling is saying that East and West are absolutely different, and that there is nothing in common between them. But in the end of this poem, he says, but there is neither East nor West when two strong men stand face to face, though they come from the ends of the earth. So there is a question, are they still absolutely different and there is nothing in common between them? Or can East and West, at some certain circumstances and in some situations, come together and form some kind of universal global civilization? And coming back to the question where this split happened, I can say that up to a certain time we could speak about some universal Eastern civilizations. The humankind was developing in some Eastern way, but it seems that the region of the Black Sea is the place where this Western civilization, the non-Eastern civilization, appeared. And if we try to formulate some common mental characteristics of an Eastern type, this will be collective principles and lack of private property, and for the Western people this will be individuality and private property, and probably for the first time in literature we could find the proof of the split into West and non-West, or East and non-East. In Virgilius' book there was a plot when people were running away from the burning Troy, and Virgil was told that his new task will be to create a new Troy. And in such circumstances, Aeneas realizes that if he believes that time goes in circles, he will not be able to create the new Troy. And if he works with the environment, he will not be able to create a new Troy. And there is a situation where he has no sense to rely on the experience of the previous years. And here he can try to create a new Troy. There is Aeneas Italicus and Aeneas from Troy, and Italian Aeneas is an Oriental man, and Trojan Aeneas is a Western person who has a new linear perception of time, and he has the idea that to create something new, to process the world, he needs to create a new Troy, and he has a new perception of personal abilities of men. And probably this is connected with this region where there is a split between the East and West. But that happened pretty long ago. But what can we see today? The region of the Black Sea is the territory where people who come from different ends of the earth can stay face to face to each other, like Kipling said. It's the place where at least three scenarios of different civilizations can meet. The first scenario is Western scenario, the scenario of liberalism. The second scenario is the scenario of Oriental scenario, and the third one is the globalization. And here at the Black Sea, on the one hand, we see the source of a potential conflict, and these conflicts might be smoothed out, and the end of the poem, as Kipling saw it, can be quite positive. Thank you very much. You managed to squeeze your plot into 5 minutes, and we can even ask questions if there are any. If there aren't any questions, let's go on. Thank you very much. It's all very understandable and very inspiring. Daria Rybakovskaya, the director of MAP Center, Geographical Center of the Sevastopol State University. This review heard, this is the time limit. Thank you very much for the possibility to speak.
В основе которых лежит либерализм. Второй сценарий – это исламский сценарий глобализации, где все же лежит некий религиозный фактор в основе цивилизации, и это китайский сценарий глобализации. И именно здесь мы видим в Большом Средиземноморье, да, вот именно с одной стороны источник конфликта, который потенциально может возникнуть, с другой стороны, опять же, при определенных ситуациях эти сценарии глобализации могут быть сглажены, и можно говорить вот о том, что концовка...
My theme will not touch upon such global processes, but I will speak about international and inter-ethnical relations within Sevastopol. Sevastopol, since its foundation, was a multinational region. At the moment, as we are very limited by time, I will not tell you about the history of the ethnical evolution, but at the moment we have about 100 nationalities and different confessions. And if we reduce the historical context of my speech, I would like to highlight the problems which are pretty acute for the city. These are the problems of victimization of the national minorities due to the formation of the new consciousness and the conflict, victim complex. I think that you understand what we will be speaking about. We will be speaking about reflection and inertia processes which can be traced in the public consciousness of the Crimean Tatars in the Crimea, which are the consequences of deportation of these people in 1944. I would like to remind you and to draw your attention to the fact that in 2014, after the reintegration of, maybe this term will be the most acceptable to the situation, after the reintegration of the Crimea into the Russian Federation, there was accepted the bill to rehabilitate Armenian, Bulgarian, Crimean Tatars in the Crimea and state support of the restoration of those ethnic groups. At the moment, the administration of the Russian Federation and the administration of the city of Sevastopol do everything possible to support and to help to overcome the reactional consequences of the deportation of 1944 and the lack of attention that was given to this problem during the Ukrainian period of the development of Crimea. I can't say that they were fully neglected, but it was used as an instrument to create international and inter-ethnical conflicts at the semi-island. At the moment, we are trying to overcome the situation using different methods, but the victim complex, which is fixed in the public consciousness, is very reactive and it's very hard to overcome it. And it brings pretty aggressive behavior of a victim to a real or to imaginary enemy. At the moment, from the outside of the public space, from the foreign actors, there is ongoing process of creating in the public consciousness of the Crimean Tatars, so this complex of victim. But I would like to draw your attention to the fact that it's impossible to overcome and to make the people not to be willing of satisfaction only by the way of creating some good conditions, living conditions. They need some symbolic steps to improve their level of self-consciousness and so that they could see that their input into the development of the semi-island and their victory in the World War II was very important. I will just very briefly speak about the situation which is developing in Mamashaev village, where a very famous representative of Crimean Tatar, Moderator, comes from. He is a hero of the Soviet Union, he is a pilot, and starting from 1990s, one of the schools of Mamashaev, they are trying to give the name of this hero. But still the situation has not come to its end. It's not a critical issue. It's not a critical comment from my side. It's just an example of how, using such kind of symbols, we could smooth out the consequences of the victim complex, which has already been created in the public consciousness, and to improve the international and inter-ethnical moods in the region. They are, in principle, without a conflict, but there is a potential for a conflict here. Thank you very much. Just a moment. Are there any questions?
Выпад с моей стороны или даже замечание, это пример того, как можно было благодаря подобного рода символам нивелировать последствия комплекса жертв, уже сложившегося в общественном сознании крымских татар. И
as a person who is dealing with this problem, with the decisions of the first Congress in 2015 here in Moscow, and they were discussing these issues of international cooperation in Russia and in the Soviet Union, and there were representatives of all the Caucasian peoples and the people from Crimean Tatars, and they said that if not for the repatriation of Crimean Tatars from Crimea to the Islamic regions of the Soviet Union, so for the criminal cases which happened during the occupation of the Crimea by the nationalists, they would be all shot after the end of the occupation. Do you have such a fact in historical memory? If you or someone else would publish such a historical materials, then from the victims they will be... No, it's not a question. Please ask questions. First of all, I was not speaking about the people as a victim. I was speaking about the victim complex which is in the public consciousness, in the public consciousness of Crimean Tatars, who, as a consequence of this complex, can demonstrate aggressive behavior. Second of all, taking into consideration all the acts which are accepted at the federal level, including the order of the president, the state should provide rehabilitation, and we cannot transfer on the whole nation the criminal cases during the Second World War. Where should we get the Nechaev Rashidov and other heroes of the Soviet Union who shed their blood for the Soviet Union? This national policy will not stand out for the generalization. I am not speaking about the situation and decisions of 1944 and whether they were useful or not, but today we have to solve these issues so that Crimea could survive without conflict. Thank you very much. I understand your position. You actually mentioned two methods. One was rehabilitation and the help with the accommodation, and the second is symbolic acts like giving the name of a hero to a school. What else? We had 9 heroes of the Soviet Union. What other symbolic acts can be there? As far as I knew, the Crimean Tatar society, but I need to say that we should speak about the Crimean Tatar society. in the Crimea and Sevastopol into its various in its policy and its public discourse. If we are speaking about Sevastopol, these are very loyal people who are ready to, through the open communication with the administration, including their leader, they are ready to negotiate and to get involved into solving their problems, and they are ready to take part in the elections, and they take active part in the election process. So they behave as citizens of this state. They want to that their role in the victory over the German occupation was accepted and recognized, and they want this label of traitor to be removed from the whole nation. We are not speaking about some ethnical political issues which are historical and that are present, and we cannot just say that this is black or white, good or bad. We should work with the same. But they want to be respected, and they want this label to be removed, and they want to be recognized as people who had played a very important role in the victory of the Soviet Union during the World War II. And despite of the fact that they do not deny collaborationism, but at the moment we are reviewing the history and there are new data coming in, and history is a very subtle material and it's very easy to hurt and very hard to rehabilitate. May I ask another question? We are following the time limits, but we also would like to have a discussion. What are the versions that are supporting this drive? And the second is probably a very daring question. Was it a mistake of Stalin and of the leadership of the Soviet Union to label them as traitors? I cannot say that this label was issued at that moment, but at your provocative question, I will speak very evasively. It was wartime. There was an objective necessity to take these or that decisions, and the history does not stay for the history does not tolerate for the subjunctive moves. We cannot stay in their shoes, and we cannot say that it would be better to do something else. And we cannot neither idealize nor demonize any policy of that time. We should understand the situation and the objective, conditional necessity to take the decisions and to assess these or that steps. We can only, when we, in general, we cannot say that this was good and that was bad. And about the external forces, here we can speak for a long time. For example, a model manual for the Western analysts, for Western anthropologists and politologists is a work published in 1978, where this idea of the nation of victims is shown, and they forget about the collaborationism, and this is also wrong. There should be a balance in the assessment of this day and of the past. And what external forces, for example, in 2015 at the second Old World Congress of the Crimean Tatars, the representatives of the Crimean Tatars were the representatives of the prohibited organization Menshlis, and they issued a declaration
какие
asking
внешние силы, ну,
the
например,
world
2015
to
год,
recognize
Всемирный
the
конгресс
genocide
правосудия
of
крымских
the
татар,
Crimean Tatars starting from
который
1893,
его, вот
but
крымских татар, его
at the
представляли
moment the
представители
Crimean
запрещенной
Tatars
организации
are
в
not
Российской Федерации Меджлиса,
ethnical
которые
conglomerate.
фактически
They are
сформулировали
separated.
декларацию обращению к
There are
всему
people who
современному
have
демократическому миру
moved to
с просьбой
Ukraine
признать
because
геноцид
propaganda
крымско-татарского
was
народа,
very
начиная
serious coming from
1783 года. То есть
Ukraine
идет
and the West,
эксплуатация
and
этой
the
тематики. Но
diaspora who
тут
is
необходимо учитывать, что крымские татары
living
сейчас не
abroad.
являются
In
единым
Turkey they have
конгломератом
about 2 million
этническим.
people,
Они
and their
разделены.
public
Они
discourse is
разделены
not
как те, которые остались
homogeneous.
здесь, на
We
территории Российской
cannot say
Федерации,
that
которые
at our territory
переселились на
the
территорию
mass
Украины,
media and the
потому что
public
пропаганда шла
officials
достаточно
who are
серьезно именно с
representing
украинской территории,
the
западные фонды и
Crimean
так далее.
Tatars
И
are
та
in conflict with
диаспора,
each
которая
other.
проживает за
But
рубежом, в
the
том числе практически
demonization
двухмиллионная
of the
диаспора в
Russian
Турции.
Federation and the Soviet Union in the
Поэтому их
historical
публичный
context
дискурс,
is
он
coming from
неоднороден.
Majlis, and
Нельзя
but I don't
сказать,
think
что
that it's
на территории
ideological
Крымского
belief.
полуострова
I
те
think that
СМИ и
this is
те
just a
публичные лица, которые
tool to
представляют
keep the
позицию
positions
крымских
which they
татар,
had during
они
the
демонстрируют
Ukrainian
конфликтность.
period and to use
Больше
the
всего такая
preferences that they
негативная
had during the Western
демонизация
from the
образа
West,
Российской
and
Федерации
they
и Советского
should
Союза, в том числе
keep
в
up the
историческом контексте,
actuality and
идет от
demand to
Меджлиса
keep up the
и,
money they
пожалуй, в
received.
основном от
Thank you very
Меджлиса.
much.
Но я не думаю,
I
что
would like
это
to mention just two comments.
идеологическая убежденность. Это
In
скорее
the
инструмент
Sevastopol
сохранить свои позиции,
University
которые
on
были в
Monday,
украинский
we
период, и пользоваться
provided
теми
the express game
преференциями,
The
которые
Unthinkable,
давались со стороны
Yalta 2,
западных
and
фондов,
the sense
в том
was
числе и
whether we
финансовое
could
влияние. То есть, надо
include the unthinkable,
сохранить свою
whether the
актуальность и востребованность, чтобы
former
получать
allies
деньги. Ну
could
вот
attack the
это
Soviet
чисто
Union and to push
логически.
the boundary towards the Curzon line. The game showed that it was unreal, but 10 years prior to that we had another game where Stalin was played by a general of the Soviet army, and Truman was played by another real general, the working Soviet Russian general, and Hitler was played by an investigation colony, and there was a group of supporters. Some of you were present in this game, and the aim was the same too, and it also was impossible. And before that, we played a game Munich 1938, and with all the intelligence forces we had, we tried to create another scenario, but the pressure of the historical circumstances showed us that the history was going in an inexorable way, and we probably could provide very subtly a game with the representatives of the Crimean Tatars organization and to model what was going on in Moscow, all the circumstances. It's a very subtle thing, but in such a game, some kind of psychotherapy is happening. And I would also risk to say, if you remember the Second Chechen War, Yeltsin asked Arkady Volsky, who was responsible for the Caucasus at that time, to go there, and he was taken to the mountains, and they're incredibly hospitable and respectful towards guests. And Volsky had a task from Yeltsin about the well-being, not only of the people, but of a personal well-being. And when Volsky was going back home, he realized that he could not return without trying to perform the task, and he said, Chokha, I have this task, here is a foreign passport, here is money, and please go away, we will not touch you. And Chokha said, if you hadn't been my guest, you would be killed. It was such an insult towards his dignity. It was just an insult for him, and it's not enough to provide documentation and to provide all the necessary things, but we also think about the symbolic issues and ideas that are bringing people together, and those who are involved should be incredibly subtle and respect the values and maybe even respect the myths, but we came to this yesterday and the day before yesterday when we said that failures are as important as victories because they create the grounds for the consolidation. We should not focus on just one aspect. We are not heroes, we are not collaborators. We were caught between the millstones of history, and any oblivion will bring further pressure. Ivan Statsenko. Ivan Statsenko, the member of the Russian Cosmic Geographical Society, an active participant of our discussions. You have 5 minutes. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I have been preparing for this meeting as one of the people, of the few people who are still here, who are reading the magazines with pain in their heart. I remember the 22nd June of 1941, when my father was brought to the army. I was 4 years old, and in the memory of a child who was born before the war and could remember a bit of the pre-war time, the situation that is happening now, probably not only for us but for the whole mankind, is incredibly important. The conference that started in Yalta the day before, I realized that this is a really important event which will be assessed in various ways worldwide. But these are issues of life and death, of the civilizations, whatever various civilizations we have on Earth. I have prepared a small speech which is called Yalta 45 and Sevastopol of 2020, the prospects of by specialists and energy sources. Yes, I have survived the occupation. Yes, I have survived when mother was hiding us in the attic so that the Germans would not find us, and we saw how the Germans were shooting the partisans, and I heard those shots and I remember this. And then I remember the victory under the Stalingrad, and the Germans very quickly removed. But when I was studying in the school, our history teacher brought us to mountain passes, and children in 1950s on this mountain pass they found corpses of our Soviet soldiers and of German soldiers, because the Germans were trying to get to Grozny, to the oil of Grozny, which is still a point to pick. But later on there was the victory, then everything was destroyed and we restored all this. And the generation to which I belong, we understand that this victory of the Soviet Union, without this victory there would not be the Soviet Union, the Russian Federation, and the care that our government gave to our generation would. Without it, I won't be able to enter Moscow State Aviation Institute. I would not meet Gagarin. I would not work at an aviation plant before the army. And after the army, when I was going along the mausoleum together with the Moscow Aviation Institute, I saw the rush around Nikita Khrushchev, and it looked strange, but Later on, they said that Powers was flying over the Urals, and only later on we saw the remnants of this airplane. And I took part in the deployment of this rocket as a rocket at the plant where the weapons were done. And later on, there was the Vigilance campaign. I was the Komsomol leader in 1962, and we were visited by Americans. They found somewhere in Kazakhstan a group of the Moscow's Aviation Institute, and they wanted to know what were we thinking about, because they believe that we came to the Virgin Lands campaign under the Kalashnikovs and don't know what they thought when they left us, because it was an event which had some influence on our relationships, and there Mikhail Jansen invited me to the construction bureau, Illusion Construction Bureau, and I was involved in the creation of the rocket nuclear shield and the Caribbean crisis. And if you see the film His Rocket Highness, you will see the intellect of Mikhail Yanshin, who from a far Siberian village came to Moscow and became the general constructor of the most modern rocket complexes, which did not allow to the Hawks to unleash the war, but at the moment we are preparing for the anniversary. In one of the books, Mikhail wrote that on the 28th of May 1984, Churchill announced the preparedness for the new war, and Roosevelt did not agree, and that's why his death was coming to consideration this. And you will see how the South of America immediately loaded into their cars as soon as they saw our weapons, and they showed that something that is in Turkey and which will only take 8 minutes to fly to Moscow, they realized that this will not work into one side. In America there are adequate people, but the world is split, and it will be always split, maybe, and we should always understand that there are people who want the Russians to be destroyed, and there are people who say that everything belongs to us in accordance with the law, but we are saying we are Russia, we have won a lot of wars, and if we go to the energy power, in Russia we created the idea of non-spheric survival of humanity. And when I was working with the students, I always said that we are united by one task to maintain not just the peace on the world, but to maintain the earth itself. And power engineers play a very important role here. And to make the conclusions, up to 1945, the war was using the oil. After that, we received the nuclear power, and Kondratyev made a report and said that nuclear power, which was first used by the Americans in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and I remember this in September 1945, I have realized that there is some very suppressing atmosphere coming down on our people, and we realized that these were bombs, that this was a demonstration of what is waiting for us in the nearest future, and thanks God, and thanks our scientists that they managed, people like Kurchatov, and his associates, healthcare, and our people said that one cannot treat us like that. And now we are saying that we have transferred into the era of fighting for the energy resources, and Russia is in energetic slavery, and that's a fact. Oil, gas or coal, and our forests, all these energy resources are becoming the tools for which the powers fight. I wanted to show you a small thing, but in our country there were very prominent scientists like Mr. Yalta, Alferov, a Nobel Prize winner, and he said that the mankind has no alternative survival but to start using the solar power. The solar power is free, it can't be privatized, and you cannot stop the supplies of this power to anyone. Just learn to use it wisely. And at the moment I am working at a group which is led by Dmitry Strelkov, an academician of the Russian Academy of Science. And this group has a goal to introduce renewable sun energy in all the regions of the Russian Federation, and we would like to start in Crimea. We have formulated a program which is called Sunny Tavrika, and together with Svetlana Rubtsova we have created a youth scientific center, and in this program you can see the pictures of what we have already done. We have created a big sun heat boiled house in Nikolaevka in Alupka, some processing equipment in Bakhchisarai in Sevastopol, and at the moment we are starting to cooperate, and Sergei Lazarev agreed that they, as Council on the Sustainable Development, they are ready to include our group into their council to provide sustainable development of energy power supply in Russia and all over the world with the use of sun energy. Dmitry Strelkov has published a very interesting article, and if a country or people do not go to ambitious goals, so they will get at the outset, and Dmitry Strelkov has created a concept with the help of which the energy problems may be solved by creation of 3 huge sun electric power plants in Australia, in Africa, in South America. And the deserts can become the sources of sun power, and using the technologies provided by Tesla. And we think that this idea of saving the nature for everybody who are divided by their confessions, by their personal ambitions, I think that nature may switch us off the global development process as an unnecessary element who was lacking mind to understand its role in this world. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ivanovich. It seems to me that history, it's strange to hear that history is so close to us, Gagarin and 1941 and 1945. And we had the happiness to hear your musical gift to our forum, Ms. Terentьeva, and the theme is repatriation during the conference. Dear friends, I prepared a very interesting presentation about the immortal combat, but unfortunately we don't have the technical possibility to show it now. That's why I can either speak about the statistics, but the repatriation of the civilians of the Soviet Union who were kept by the Americans and the British soldiers. The Soviet part believed that it was one of the main issues of the Yalta conference. I will only read the following. The majority, most of all people were sent to Germany, 3,338,580 people. From the Russian Federation, 1,906,661, 2,102,000 from Ukraine, and 399,000 people from Belarus. The next one is Moldova, 87,000. I would like to say that 2 years ago I used this document, and 1 year ago there was published the book. Yuri Arzamaskin, a PhD in history, a professor in Moscow Military University, published a book, The Mysteries of the Soviet Repatriation, and as I am limited in time, I will work with the images and just imagine the 21st of April of 2018, I was in Marburg Cathedral in Germany and I could see the Duke of Bellstedt, who in my childish consciousness in 1961, I was about 3 years old, and my mom in 1943, when she was 18, my mom was in a camp in Germany amongst the genocide of the Russian people. She was in Staatsdetektiv Wadens, and throughout her life she told me about that, and only in 2017 I realized that Staatsdetektiv Wadens is a city called Wolfsburg, the headquarters of Volkswagen. In 1997, when she was dying, I promised her to find all the places where she was in Germany, and I will tell the whole world about that. In 2017, I found out that this was Wolfsburg, and I saw the picture of Neuhaus palaces. There are 3 palaces, the Wolfsburg, which gave the name to the city. In 1938, Hitler brought Porsche to Wolfsburg, the first bug, and they started to construct the houses for the... First of all, they thought that these will be the victims from the concentration camps, and there was a landslide of Russian slaves, and I will just read. I wrote a novel. It's a trade union in Germany which provided the employment for the German workers, and Volkswagen was also a part of Kondratyev, and I called my novel the Kondratyev Stadt. There was a very strict hierarchy of people because there were also workers from Scandinavia, from Belgium, from Holland, from Italy, and Scandinavians and Italians were normal workers. They received salaries, they were protected by the Red Cross, but the Poles were also slaves, and they could not move, and my mom was also a also was a slave. She spoke perfectly German, and she said that she was from German origin, from Odessa, and she was employed at Rear Axle Assembly, as you probably remember in Charlie Chaplin's film. When the conveyor is going, she had to assemble the parts at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. Actually, they had to wake up and to go to the plant. And she was just 18 years old. And if you did anything wrong, the master would beat you. Food was awful, and my mother suffered from stomach ulcer and duodenal ulcer throughout her life. And why I was looking at Uta Naumburska, because her image that Rorik painted in 1933 as the peacekeeper, he wrote a wonderful picture, and he used this Sandy figure. Umberto Eco said that if from all the female images I could invite someone to dinner, it would be Uta Naumburska, not Venus of Milo, not a cross-dresser Mona Lisa. It would be a touching Uta. And when I was a small girl, my mother painted to me a medieval queen with the crown, and when in the 6th year I received a history manual from Germany, and I saw this picture and I showed to my mom, "This is the queen you drew to me when I was a little girl." And unfortunately I cannot even show you. Uta Naumburska reminded very much of my mom and of the picture by Rorik. And on the 12th of April in 1945, the Easter, the Orthodox and the Catholic Easter was at the same day. It was a holiday, and my mother didn't have to work on that day, and she wanted to wash her dress, and they were very much afraid of different infections, and she wanted to wash her clothes. And suddenly she heard the noise of the airplanes, and the Allied Air Forces came on this holiday, and the bomb came into the barracks where my mother was, and the air blast threw her away in that dress, the only dress she had there. It threw her out of this camp, and she fell down on the paving, and my mom got back into life in some flat, and she saw that her own hair and a piece of skin, and the water was red, and she was brought into a hospital. And 2 years ago I was in an archive in Germany. I handed them in the memoirs of my mom, and I found out a lot of information about this shelling. And when she got healthy, the doctor told her that they didn't know who she was by nationality, because during when the Americans came back all the time with their shellings, there were 2 paramedics, Ivan and Yusuf, a Ukrainian and a Polish guys. They were carrying her all the time from the hospital to the shelter and bed, and she asked them in German to leave her alone because she could not suffer this constant bumping. And when she got healthy, she was released back into the camp, and she was in an isolation cell, and during a break, she went to the administration of the camp and said that she can't do it anymore. She was in the isolation cell because one of the German soldiers saw her red neck piece and took it from her, and she, after that, she was sent to the salt mines. My German friends took me to those mines on the exact 75th anniversary of this shelling, and I then saw the Zolta Yalbushka, who is having some kind of stone under her cloak, probably it's a holy cross, and one day they woke up and they were afraid to be flooded in the mines. It's in Westfall, in a museum where I could get. So they had their hospital, and during the Soviet camp she was working in that hospital after she. All those materials of the Yalta conference, they say that each country, Americans and British and the Soviet part, should be very strict in the repatriation, and everything was written there, but I wanted to speak about my family. So my mother woke up one morning and she heard the harmonicas, she saw black-skinned soldiers, and she wanted to go home. She didn't want to get to the United States or to Canada, but they just tracked people, and some of them ended up in Belgium, some in Holland, but my mother was lucky, and she later got to the Soviet territory, and she was taken to a hospital to work there because there were a lot of wounded, there were a lot of sick people from those camps. And in Freedom Cell, from Naumburg, she was brought to Freedom Cell to the highest school of Adventists, which was founded in 1899. And all the time there were hospitals from this place. And in 1945 there was a hospital for Russian, for Soviet captives and Ostarbiters. And now there is an Institute of Adventists, and I visited them, and I've met there a woman who was from Kazakhstan, and she showed me into the hall where there was a break between the services, and there was a piano there, and they sat down and they played Chopin and Schubert, and it was exactly on the 75th anniversary of this shelling. My mother asked me to love my country. She was not offended by her fate. She failed to become a surgeon because all her documents were lost. And when the Ukraine so they had this force through fun, and my book is called Freud to Craft. Thank you very much.
На свете. И когда приняли вот трезуб, когда украинская советская, она сказала, будет гражданская война.
The next session will be called Sevastopol in the Zone of Civilizations, and geography has much to do here because we are not going into something abstract, but we are focusing on the peculiarities of this region, and I would like to invite Viktor Yegorov from the Institute of Biology of the Southern Seas. And I think that we have already heard at other sessions that our nature and southern seas and biology are very important to us. Dear colleagues, I will only speak for 4 or 5 minutes. I'm welcoming you in Sevastopol. I am the 6th generation of my relatives who are working for living here. My father died in Sukharu Balka. My grandfather was constructing the embankments. So for me, Sevastopol is a native city and a Russian city. I am the head of science in the Institute of Southern Seas Biologists, and I will be very brief about our institute, and I will also speak about the cooperation of different nationalities in our institute. Our institute was founded by a famous anthropologist and geographist, Nikolay who said that it was necessary to create a biological station at the Black Sea. In 1871, it was built in Sevastopol on the southern bank of the Northern Bay, and the task was to study the flora and fauna of the Black Sea. On the initiative of Mr. Kovalevsky, in 20 years this station was supported by the Academy of Science, which improved its position as a scientific center. Then we came into the care of the Soviet Academy of Science, and in 1933 there was created an Institute of Biology, and in 2014 we came out of the Academy of Science of Ukraine, and in July 2019 there was created a scientific center named after Kovalevsky with several chambers in several cities. And there is a branch office in Moscow. Next year our institute will be 150 years old, and we have 11 programs of research, and I will not mention them here, but I will speak about the national issue. As you saw, our institute was tossed from Russia to Ukraine and back, but nevertheless we always had different national diasporas. I have been an employee of this institute for more than 50 years, and I can see that the major part are Russians, Ukrainians. We had a very big group from Israel of Jews, and recently we have been joined by some Tatars, not necessarily by Crimean Tatars. We have never had any national issues. We had never had any associations based on national characteristics. For us, the main issue is the scientific importance, and that is why I would like to say that as I have been living in Sevastopol my whole life, this city has always been a multinational city. When I was a student, we had lots of Greeks, and there has never been any national issue here. We just felt ourselves as citizens of the Soviet Union or the citizens of Russia. And after 1990, we were left in the Ukraine, but nevertheless we always spoke Russian. At our meetings, we never had any fights on the national issue, and I had to write some reports in Ukrainian, but we always thought of us as of Russian citizens, and in my opinion, we should not assess people by their nationalities, but by their business qualities. My wife is Ukrainian. Thank you very much.
То есть мы всегда ощущали себя жителями российской страны. И я считаю, что тут ничего плохого нет. Вот лично
It will be a connected theme between the yesterday speakers and those who are speaking today. Good afternoon to your colleagues. For me, it's a great honor to speak after such prominent scientists. I will always remember my 15 years which I worked in the Institute of the Southern Seas, and we are continuing our cooperation. My theme is the maintenance of the historical truth about the World War II, and I am working as the Vice Director of the Institute of International Affairs, and in the field of my responsibilities there is the theme of maintenance of historical truth at the Department of Politology and Sociology, and for other departments which are researching this theme, and it's very important that we are dealing with this, with educating our people by publications which are published more and more often in the mass media, in special social networks, and I would like to speak about it. We have already started to speak about it, and we had a discussion, and at your permission, I will not speak about the scientific issue of this classifications of the post-truth, and as we are very limited in time, I will only speak about, I will try to answer the question why our society recently often sees those fake publications, and so often the historical truth about the World War II is misinterpreted, and what measures are taken by the state. A lot of acts have already been published and signed which prevent the spread of fake news, and maybe we have heard during the discussion, we had heard a question whether we should probably not react to such fake news. And I would like to try to answer this question, because as far as I understand, there are different points of view on this issue and different perceptions of post-truth, and I would say my opinion. I believe that we need to react and we cannot just miss it out, and I believe that the measures which are introduced are not enough, and that we should be more strict with those people who are spreading fake news in social networks, because such lack of punishment supports the criminal offense, and we have seen the consequences of the attacks on the immortal combat, and if we do not follow up, and if we do not try to find the IPs from which the photos of the Nazi officers had been loaded. This is my personal opinion in what concerns fake news and misinterpretation of the truth about the World War II. And besides the government level of deciding whether it's necessary to make our measures against those who are publishing intentionally misinterpreted information, we should also work with young people and including our respected audience, we are one of the chains of the huge network which will allow us to get even further into the research of Yalta conference and the World War II. And in our work, I as vice director on the scientific work, we try to attract our students and to get them involved into the research. And I told you about the large-scale project which was called We Know, We Are Proud Of. We remember, dedicated to the 75th anniversary of the victory, and we will go on with this work. And I would like once more to voice my appreciation to the organizers of this conference. It's incredibly important, despite of all the troubles and problems, because of the limitations laid on such events by coronavirus infection. And despite all the difficulties, we still managed to provide this conference, and we have seen lots of students in the Sevastopol University at the lecture, and we would like to thank you for the game which you have provided for our young people who were discussing they are still discussing the game. Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, we have a possibility to work in a more informal way. I would like to ask Natalia Vinokurova to say a few words. Natalia is representing one of the organizers of our conference. It's the administration of the Crimea and representative office in Moscow. Dear colleagues, we touched upon a very important theme, and the leitmotif was that each of us has his or her own perception of history, which we should pass on through our family. And this direction is not new, and we are pretty much aware about it. And the attitude towards history has always been in school and at university pretty formal. We perceived it as an ideological dogma which we had to learn. I remember my young years when during all the students had to study the history of the Communist Party, and later on we had the culturology. These were ideological disciplines. Unfortunately, we cannot tear apart history from ideology. Ideology is a part of our life, and that's why it seems to me that the approach towards learning the history through the stories of families is the best, and I support the publishing of such books as The History Told by the People. It's not a new direction, but it might be on demand, and we can support the self-conscious level of Crimean Tatars. We should not forget that they had heroes, and that the representatives of various people live in Russia, and the story told about one person should touch other people's as well. We should give out those stars as the role models. Why is it going away? Is it because we are losing the interest towards history because we believe that if that's a dogma? I will give you an example from my life. My grandfather was born in 19th century, and he had gone through all the wars of the 20th century. But the most awful situation was during the World War II. He had a bottle with explosive, and he was taken to a German camp, and he 3 times tried to run away, and he also told the Allies about the German military organizations to the alien forces. But when he was offered to go away to the United States, he said, "No, I would like to go to my motherland, and even if Stalin is sending us to the camps in Siberia, I would rather stay in Siberia." I found his medal for courage which was given to him by Stalin. He was not repressed. We forget about some things. Yes, there were some local stories, but we can sometimes find some facts in the history of our families, lots of such facts. And I believe that this direction should be planned. It should be a very strong state program where we should not just discuss something in local meetings and conferences about the stories of our families, but this should be a very strong and very well planned program which can be broadcasted on the TV. There should be books and there should be state support to such projects. And in such a way, we will understand what is our state, what is the connection between us and our state and the world. And as a historian, as a PhD in history, I have faced this several times with my students, and when you speak to them and tell them about the story of the family, I can see that their interest and their patriotism is starting to ignite. And this is the narrative attitude towards history, and it should take an important place in the manuals and in our social program. That is something that I wanted to say today. Thank you very much.
Очень близко вот это как раз
I
идея история через семью.
I can connect with this idea, and
собственным опытом. Вот
I'm ready to share my own experience.
Он тоже прошел.
My grandfather was an officer, and he had been at the front of the World War I and World War II, and during the war, it was very hard, and I remember pretty well the awards which I liked to look at when I was a little boy. And now we have a website which is called the Hero Acts of the People, and I found out at that website that he was awarded with the Suvorov award, and he didn't know about that, and this is our family discovery. And if we had such websites where you could, through your family, find some discoveries of something that is connected with your relatives, with the people whom you know in person, I think this would be a very strong, this could have a very strong upbringing importance. And here I would like to say that history through family is a very it might be a very strong movement which will allow us to take a dramatically new approach to upbringing. Thank you. Thank you, dear colleagues. We are coming to the end of our discussion, and at your permission, I will read you a page which I just opened in a volume at random. It's long, but it gives very important ideas to make two conclusions. This is memoirs by Semyon Karpenko. It's called My Fighting Way During the World War II. I was born a year after the October Revolution, so together with the socialism I developed. Can you imagine such a level of social consciousness? Family normally decides the future of a person. I was born in a peasant family, and I was absolutely sure that I would become a peasant. I was not going to become an officer. Then he was brought to the Far East, and finally he ended up in a penal battalion. Espionage and our failure. A spy at war can replace a whole battalion. A major spy got into our part together with a boy and a girl, and he, from the rear end, he transmitted the information about the location over the radio. And in the spring, we crossed the Akar River, and we set up a ferry. But as soon as we came out at the other bank, the Germans opened cannon and machine gun fire, and a lot of people were killed. And this happened several times. And only after when we shot down a plane spy, he told us about this major, and our contra spies arrested him. And that night I nearly died of negligence. I fell asleep on a pile of firewood, and they went away without me. I was found frozen, and this means that I could have died without being wounded. They brought to our department the representatives of the death to spies, and they said that if three soldiers would go to the Germans and to make a diversion against them, then they will remove the criminal record. They took grenades and they went to the Germans. Ours were shooting with blank cartridges. The Germans were not firing. They were waiting for defectors, and our guys came to the German line and threw their grenades into machine gun points. And while the Germans were canning to themselves, our heroes came back. And after that, I have never seen any cases of defection. And when they came to Germany, when they were capturing Berlin, he writes here in every detail, they supported our spirit through newspapers. Such writers as Sholokov, Simonov, and Yarenburg, in very simple, comprehensive, and bright words. When we came from Poland to the Eastern Prussia, and there is a huge difference in the level of life, in the level of conveniences. We were very much surprised how rich the Germans lived at that time. They had good quality houses, they had 10-12 cows per family, they had a lot of birds, and they had a lot of products and food prepared for the winter, and we started to rob them. You come into the house and there are cereal, sausages, canned food. Can you imagine how clearly he thinks? And we were much, very angry at them because they were so rich and they came to us to rob and kill us. And we started to shoot the cows, the furniture, but at that time Elia Ehrenburg wrote, we can't be guided just by revenge. We need to think about the future. We are fighting with the Nazi, we are not fighting with the German people. And there was an order from Stalin that we had to stop shooting immediately and to stop looting, and that we will need to take the compensation with everything they damaged in our country. And those who will be looting should be judged and shot. When we came into Prussia, we fired a leather factory which was making shoes and bags, and the people were running away. When we came into their houses, their fireplaces were working and there was hot food on the tables, and we realized our mistake. We realized that they were so much afraid of us. And I would like to voice three ideas. We were coming to this idea through different speeches, and when we spoke about the Institute of Biology of the Southern Seas, and in everyday life we have inter-civilizational communications, and we don't have the conflicts because the criteria is the dignity, the scientific research, and not the revenge for some this or that thing. We are speaking not only about the ideology. Yesterday we started a discussion, and we will go on with that. What kind of ideology we need? Because patriotic ideology is not comprehensive. Without Gagarin, we cannot survive in the global world. It's a global scale. We should work in 4 dimensions, not to be conservative, not to be popular patriots, but to be future patriots. And we are speaking about the type of a person. In the 20th century, roughly speaking, there were 4 types of people: the Soviet person, aimed at creativity, at mutual assistance, at the spice of bourgeoisie. And the second type was the fascist type. It was a very firmly formed personality with the children brought up in genetical experiments. The third type of personality was American, based on the strategy of the 20th to aim people to stock market, to cars, to, like Napoleon Hill, think and get rich. This was a very smart project provided by algorithm and scientists. And the fourth type of personality is a mixture of people like Mahatma Gandhi and Che Guevara. So these are anti-colonialists and lots of movements which were fighting against colonization. And this type of personality is still very important. But all the four types have been damaged and discredited. The American, the Soviet, the Nazi, and the anti-colonial, and even the liberal American types have been discredited. We don't have the leading type of person. We have crypto-anarchists, crypto-punks, archaic patriots, and finally we are getting the ideology of integrated people, of big people. Mikhalkov spoke about it in his film. When he's coming back home and one of his colleagues has created his home and he's saying, you are big people and you think that you are deciding for everybody, but we small people will win. So there is an ideology of big people, meaning the scale of personality. You may be a big person and to work as a nurse and still be a big person. And the ideology of small opportunists. So this is the question. And we are coming to the role of Sevastopol as the center of the civilizational communication, because returning to the harbor means that the gravitational field of a certain civilization was stronger and more important. And I would risk to say that in 2008 we made a forecast of Russian-Ukrainian communication, and the forecast showed that there might be integration. But we asked whether there is one subject in Ukraine, and we found out that there are at least 3 or in fact 5 subjects. These are people, these are politicians, there were 5 of them. And the 5th scenario implemented itself in full scale. It was our calculation made in 2008. It showed that in any way there will happen this Crimean Spring, and the main motive will be not only the willpower of people, but also the military strategic considerations. It was clear that there will be sanctions, and that there will be a conflict, and it won't cover the whole Ukraine, but that the heavy weapons will be used. We published it in 2016, and it was obvious that there will be a rebirth, and at the beginning, Yushchenko will be replaced with a pro-Russian politician. It's 12 o'clock, remember that. And there will be the rebirth of the regime. And in what we have in the end, if the country is lacking the strategical subjectivity, there is no ideology, and there is no force, and there is no personal power in the dialogue of civilization. If you have nothing to show, if you don't have the energy of drive, then any other representative of another civilization will just force you with his energy. That's why you need scientific support, you need the conviction, and you need the energy of drive. And to be a subject, you need at least three characteristics. To receive strategical subjectivity, you need reflection, you should understand who you are, and the fact that the Crimean people are still in the process of self-reflection means that the process is ongoing, and that we need to help them to bring this reflection to the full-fledged understanding of who is who and to the sense of this context in the history. Secondly, we need self-determination, so that people could understand, so determine themselves as subjects, and that they are not just behaving on the willpower of some external forces, but that they are capable to make influence. And the third characteristic is the ability to self-project. And what's going on in the Crimea is the processes of reflection, self-determination, the ability to self-project. And in this city of dialogues and conflicts of civilizations, we were supported by the noise of a helicopter and the cannon shot. I think this all means that we have achieved our goal, and that the first day we spoke substantively, and at the moment we are speaking, we were filled with the personal histories of Ivan and Ekaterina, and through those personal histories and the histories told by the people, we have felt that we are all together. Dear colleagues, thank you very much. I would like to thank everybody for your impact, for your participation. I'm sorry that we had so little time, but I'm happy that we have come to the mutual understanding. What do you think? Have we developed your idea? Thank you very much.